Hello everyone, my name is Andy and I am a poet and writer. I'm here in my office at home where I do most of my writing, and I am this year's judge for the Ilkley Literature Festival children's poetry competition. And I'm here to give you some tips about how to write good poems and give you a chance of winning the competition this year. First of all, the subject for this year, the prompt for this year is nature or the natural world. And my first tip is about how to decide what to write in your poem. So tip number one is not to just go with your first idea about what to write in your poem, but to give yourself different options. Try to come up with 2 or 3 different things that you might write and then decide which one's the most interesting, which one is likely to be surprising when I read it and when other people read it and when other people hear it. So something that not everyone will have thought of. So a few different options. Firstly, you might think of something that you just want to describe in nature, whether that is weather or a natural scene like a forest or an animal or something like that. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just your first option. Another option is to use your imagination a little bit and imagine a situation that isn't how things are, but you could imagine it and then describe it. For instance, you might imagine being a part of the natural world that isn't humans and write a poem called something like If I Was a Dolphin, or If I Was the Rain. Or you could imagine something changing in nature the day the rain stopped falling and describe what that would be like. Another thing to think about is what scale do you want to look at nature? Are you zooming in really small and describing tiny things? Are you zooming out really far and talking about the whole universe? And finally, what always works well is for part of you to be in the poem, your experience to be in the poem, your opinions to be in the poem. One way to do that is to think about a memory you have of when nature had a big effect on you. That might be that you were amazed the first time you saw the sea, and you can write about that. It might be that you were scared when you experienced something scary in nature. Maybe it was a thunderstorm, maybe it was seeing a fox. Totally up to you, but if you can include yourself, that's always a good thing. Tip 2, use the senses. So we experience the world through 5 senses, as we all know. What often happens when we're writing is we forget about the rest of the senses and just think about sight. So we describe what things look like, but we forget to include sound or smell or taste or touch. You don't need to include everything, but if you at least include one other sense, not just sight, that will help your readers, your listeners, to experience the poem more fully. So try and include a sound in there, or a smell, or a touch, or something like that. Tip number 3, use specific details. So where you can, instead of just saying tree, can you say which kind of tree? Because if you tell us exactly what kind of tree, an oak tree or a pine tree or a Christmas tree, then that is your way of controlling what happens in your reader's mind or in your listener's mind, and it will make people connect to your poem better. Instead of just bird, there's a very big difference between an ostrich and a robin. Okay, so try to be specific with your detail. Tip number 4 is on rhyming. If you want to rhyme, great, no problem. If you don't want to rhyme, that's also fine. A lot of people think that poems have to rhyme and that's part of what a poem is. It isn't. Poems don't need to rhyme. If you want to make it rhyme, that's fine, but if that's difficult for you, or if it is preventing you saying what you want to say, forget about rhyming, just write it without rhyme. Which leads me on to tip 5. So if without rhyme you feel like it doesn't feel like a poem, the easiest and most effective way to make something feel like a poem and to be poetic is to include simile or metaphor. Simile and metaphor are basically the same thing. They're both ways of comparing one thing to a different thing. Okay? So an example I use quite often is with clouds. And the way you can practice is just to put the word like at the end of what you're describing. The clouds are like candy floss. The clouds are like floating sheep that have inhaled too much helium, and so on and so on. You can use phrases like, or you can use the phrase as something as. The clouds are as fluffy as floating sheep, candy floss, mashed potatoes, and so on. One other phrase you might use is as though. The clouds float above me as though some sheep have inhaled too much helium and floated into the sky. So you can get the same result with different phrases. Good luck. I look forward to hearing your poems, as does my pet owlbear. See you later.